ladies and gentlemen, as you may have noticed in the intros, I emphasize the word former. And not too long ago, these gentlemen, we all were in the trenches ourselves, commanding troops throughout their careers and in all the leadership roles they've had. They have navigated companies, brands, regions through several different crises. In the kind of crisis we're confronted with today, I think they're very uniquely positioned to give you what we're calling the outside-in perspective. By now, most of you in the audience would have heard pretty much all the leaders in the industry, and Bhuvi showed who all have been on his shows itself. And you've heard them talk about how they're dealing with the crisis today and what plans they're putting in for tomorrow. And I would refer to that as the inside-out perspective. They're in there in the trenches, so what they're doing is the inside-out perspective. But with a ringside view, perhaps with, I think, a little more objectivity, and certainly backed by amazing experience of the group, I think their views of these issues which we are confronting with would probably be of great relevance to all of you. So since our time is limited, we'll cover certain specific issues. We'll hear the views on the role of the government, of the industry, lobbying. We'll hear about this whole big broha on hygiene and safety and what it means and for what time period, how long recoveries will take, how do we phase it out. And finally, you will get advice and some insights from them as to how you all individually, collectively, as employees, as leaders, as owners, whoever's there, can navigate through this crisis as we come out stronger. Very, very interesting. Let me try and just quickly summarize, because we had comments which cut across different aspects. So the whole way in which lobbying can improve using a NASSCOM kind of a benchmark for our industry, appointing at a Secretary General level, that whole lobbying has to be now dispersed down to regional, state levels for it to be more effective. I think that's one of the things which clearly came out. In terms of what the state government has to do, and when you talk about even they control so much in terms of excise laws, in terms of property taxes, in terms of any state level issues, Maharashtra would be a good example where, you know, a very important politician is the tourism minister. So by default, the industry expects to get some relief. I think that needs to happen in all. We heard about the banking and financial services industry, and Rahul makes the point that really at this point, the idea is not to ask the government for dole. The idea is to say, at least make the required policy changes today, whether it is looking at tourism to come on to a concurrent list today. So that's not about giving money. So, okay, we are not asking for dole. There is a whole section of or class of people in India who need money, cash more. But is this the time to effect policy change? And it comes back to saying, are we as an industry able to influence that? Ki chalo paise nahi de pa rahe ho, but isn't this the time to, you know, several changes in policies which will not cost you anything, and which can be seen as true reform measures in this time. I think the government's trying to do it, but our industry should, and, you know, getting away from this tag of being elitist. I think that was also a common comment which came from some of you, that somehow this suit boot industry elitism, when it comes to our social heritage evolving today into something different. I think these were all what I could gather from. So let's move on. Just it relates to government in a way, but I quickly want to ask some of the panelists, especially in Delhi, but I think even in Bombay and other cities, this thing about the government wanting to take hotels literally by force to being COVID facilities. And there's a huge amount of issues there within the industry. There are differing views on whether it's the right thing to do, wrong thing to do, can be done or not. It's very interesting when here's what's the role of the poor revenue manager these days? Bichare ko poochte owners ki yaar, December mein what will be my occupancy? And the poor guy says, what benchmark do you want me to reference? Last December versus this December? There is no, there's no baseline to project, right? So it's really becomes challenging. But the consensus clearly seems to be that any kind of recovery is about 12 to 18 months away, where we can start approaching back to peak times. Let me move on, and we're getting towards the back end of our discussions. And this is again something I would like all panelists to talk about, and probably the most key part of this discussion. All the audience out there who are listening in, viewing, will be viewing. I think ultimately the crisis in many ways can be put as a humanitarian crisis. It's a challenge to people who are at all levels, employees, managers, whatever you might call them. And I think they are looking for that light, or what is it that they can do? How should they tackle the future? I mean, that is going to be a bit of a hard, walk up for a while. But how is it that they can stay positive? What would your guidance be? So I would like each of you to just spend 3 or 4 minutes giving your advice to any stakeholders. It could be to employees affected, it could be to general managers and what they're facing, it could be to owners of hotels and businesses.